Imagine walking into your office on a Monday morning. The lights flicker on automatically. The hum of the air conditioning greets you. But as you scan the rows of desks, there isn't a single soul in sight. It's quiet, too quiet. This video is for educational purposes only and is not financial advice. If you look closely at the history of the American worker, you'll notice something hauntingly strange. If you were to map out the productivity of the workforce starting in the mid-1970s, the line would shoot upward like a rocket, climbing higher every single year as technology became more sophisticated. Yet, if you look at the line representing real wages, what your paycheck actually buys at the grocery store, it's essentially flat. It's as if we've been running a marathon for 40 years, our muscles burning and our hearts pounding, only to look down and realize we've been sprinting on a treadmill that hasn't moved an inch. We were promised that innovation would lift all boats. But somewhere along the line, the gears of that promise started to grind. It's not that the wealth isn't being generated, it's being captured by the very systems that replaced the human touch. When you see those charts showing stagnant purchasing power despite record-breaking corporate growth, you aren't just looking at cold, hard data. We have spent half a century optimizing the life out of the workplace, and in doing so, we've fundamentally altered the bargaining power of the person sitting in the chair. But why did this divergence happen exactly when it did? Let's peel back the layers of this economic mystery and see exactly how the machines changed the math of your monthly income. Think of the modern economy as a high-speed assembly line that never sleeps. Production costs plummet, and suddenly, that new smartphone or household appliance hits the shelves at a price point that makes it accessible to millions. We get more utility for fewer dollars, and our quality of life edges upward. It feels like a rising tide that should lift every boat. In a textbook world, those efficiency gains would naturally flow back to the people operating the machines. But the math of the boardroom rarely mirrors the math of the break room. The worker isn't necessarily being replaced by a robot, but they are being devalued by one. Their labor becomes a commodity, a plug-and-play component that is easily swapped, standardized, and squeezed. Consider the difference between a master craftsman and a technician. The technician, however, is tasked with keeping the automation running smoothly. When the machine does the heavy thinking and the heavy lifting, the worker's bargaining power begins to evaporate. You aren't being paid for your ingenuity anymore. You're being paid for your availability to supervise the algorithm. We are living in an era where we can produce more than at any point in human history, yet the average paycheck feels like it's running on a treadmill, moving incredibly fast while staying in the exact same spot. We are trading our long-term income growth for the immediate gratification of cheaper goods. To understand why this cycle is so difficult to break, we have to look at who actually holds the keys to the kingdom when the software takes control. Imagine a sprawling, infinite factory floor that stretches beyond the horizon. For decades, the engine of this facility was human effort. Hands moving, minds calculating, and eyes checking for errors. It doesn't replace the entire factory, but it systematically scoops up the most repetitive, predictable tasks from every desk. This is the substitution effect in action. When software begins to handle the data entry, the basic sorting, or the initial drafting of a report, it effectively hollows out the middle of the job description. Suddenly, the worker isn't being replaced entirely, but the specific, high-frequency tasks that define their daily value are being offloaded to a silent, tireless algorithm. Think of it like a professional athlete losing their ability to practice the fundamentals. As those tasks migrate onto the digital conveyor belt, the human worker is left with only the most complex, unpredictable scraps. While that might sound like it elevates the work, in reality, it creates a bottleneck. Your bargaining power is tethered to your replaceability. When the digital belt handles the bulk of the workflow, your ability to walk away or demand a raise diminishes. You are no longer the primary engine of the process. You are the monitor, the safety valve, or the person who cleans up the edge cases our software can't quite grasp. It's a quiet erosion of leverage. You aren't being fired. You're being marginalized by the efficiency of the tools you helped install. And as this digital belt keeps moving, sweeping away more of our core duties, We have to start asking what happens when the machines eventually stop needing us to supervise their work altogether. But there is a flip side to this thinning of the middle. We aren't just looking at the death of tasks. We are witnessing the birth of a new, hyper-specialized hierarchy. The blacksmith could hammer out a horseshoe, a hinge, or a nail. A jack of all trades whose value was in his own physical repetition. Suddenly, the most valuable person in the room wasn't the one swinging the hammer. It was the person who knew how to calibrate the steam pressure, repair the boiler, and redesign the entire assembly line to be 10% faster. Automation doesn't just replace labor, it demands a different kind of partner. It creates a vacuum of expertise that only a select few can fill. They become an architect of the workflow. This creates a peculiar, widening canyon in the labor market. On the other side, you have these high-leverage positions where a single person, armed with the right technical intuition, can command the productivity of 1,000 automated units. If you are the one steering it, your output isn't just your own. It's the collective output of every line of code you're overseeing. This creates a massive premium on what we call high-value cognitive labor. It's not just about being smart, it's about being the person who can synthesize the machine's speed with human strategy. You're essentially competing against the efficiency of the software itself. We are seeing a bifurcated economy emerge in real time. In the other, they are tied to the immense scale of what a machine can do when guided by a human hand. But as we start to rely on this elite tier of supervisors to keep the gears turning, we have to consider the cost of this specialization and who gets left behind when the barrier to entry becomes a fortress. But beyond that fortress, there is a quiet, persistent disconnect that has defined the modern era. If you look at the charts from the mid-20th century, breakpoint fives, you'll see two lines moving in lockstep, one representing the sheer volume of output a worker produces, and the other representing the size of their paycheck. But around the late 1970s, those lines didn't just drift apart, they diverged into a widening canyon, while our collective ability to generate value skyrocketed. Thanks to the relentless march of automation and computing, the median wage stagnated. So where did all that excess value go? Think of a massive automated factory floor. Today, that same machine often displaces the need for those hands entirely. The wealth generated by that machine is no longer distributed as wages. Instead, it is captured by the people who own the steel, the software, and the patents. This isn't a natural law of physics. It's a structural shift in how we value contribution. We've reached a point where productivity has become decoupled from prosperity for the average person. When a company replaces 100 manual processes with a single line of code, the cost of production drops, but the savings aren't typically passed down as salary increases. They are realized as profit. We are objectively living in the most productive period in human history, yet the anxiety surrounding job security and stagnant income has never felt more acute. We are essentially living in a high-tech economy that still operates on an old-school distribution model, that rewards ownership far more generously than it rewards effort. But to understand why this keeps happening, we have to look at the very nature of the tools we are building and who truly holds the keys to the kingdom. But if we zoom out from the charts and the cold projections of a jobless future, we find a different story, one that's less about the total extinction of the worker and more about a slow tectonic shift in what it actually means to be employed. It's a compelling narrative, perfect for headlines, but it misses the messy human reality of how technology actually integrates into our lives. Think of it like the transition from the farm to the factory. When the mechanical reaper arrived, it didn't mean the end of human work. It meant the end of a specific kind of back-breaking drudgery. Today, the tools are different, algorithms instead of steam engines, software instead of steel, but the pattern remains. However, we need to be honest about the cost of that evolution. When a job is automated, the person who held that position doesn't simply download a new set of skills overnight. They don't just swap their shovel for a tablet and move on. During that gap, families feel the pressure, communities struggle to keep up, and the sense of stability that comes with a familiar craft begins to erode. It's not that the machine is taking the job. It's that the machine is changing the rules of the game faster than the players can learn how to play. Instead, we are navigating a long, winding bridge. On one side, we have the security of the old roles, and on the other, the efficiency of the new ones. The danger isn't that we will be replaced by robots. It's that we will be ignored by the systems that benefit from them. We have to acknowledge that while work is inherently resilient, the people doing it are fragile. To find the answer, we have to look past the hardware and into the boardrooms where the decisions about these tools are actually being made. The boardrooms are indeed mapping out a future where efficiency is the only metric that matters. But that doesn't mean your professional trajectory is a foregone conclusion. We stop viewing ourselves as cogs in a machine and start acting as the architects who understand the blueprint. Think of it like this: a calculator can solve a complex equation in a nanosecond, but it has no idea why you're solving it, or what the social consequences of the answer might be. That why, the context, the ethics, and the human nuance is your strongest currency. Machines are excellent at processing data, but they are hollow when it comes to reading a room. When you pivot, move toward roles where your presence is not just a utility, but a necessity. You're doing the work of a processor. This isn't about running away from technology. It's about upgrading your human stack. Be the translator who can take a cold, hard data point and weave it into a narrative that actually moves people to action. Think of your career as a portfolio. An AI is only as good as its training data, which means it is permanently tethered to the past. You, however, have the capacity for intuition, the ability to look at a chaotic, unprecedented situation and make a decision based on experience, gut feeling, and moral judgment. It's messy, it's subjective, and it is entirely yours. When you stop being a conduit for information and start being a curator of meaning, you stop being a line item on a budget and start being an essential partner in the process. But even with the right skills in your toolkit, there is one final, uncomfortable reality we have to address before we can truly understand what comes next. The uncomfortable truth is this: the era of the static career is dead. We are moving away from a world where your degree is a lifetime annuity and toward a landscape defined by perpetual reinvention. Automation isn't just coming for the repetitive tasks. It is stripping away the illusion of job security, leaving only the reality of value creation. If you are waiting for the market to stabilize, you are waiting for a ship that has already left the harbor. The economic outlook favors the nimble. As algorithms handle the logistics, the premium on human judgment, emotional intelligence, and complex problem-solving will skyrocket. The future of your wallet doesn't depend on a pension or a corporate ladder. It depends on your ability to cultivate human capital. This means treating your brain as your most aggressive investment portfolio. It means diversifying your skills, hedging against obsolescence by learning how to learn, and constantly pivoting into the spaces where machines struggle to follow. Think of yourself as a startup. When you stop viewing your income as a fixed output of your time and start viewing it as a variable return on your intellectual assets, the entire dynamic shifts. You are no longer just a worker. You are an architect of your own economic resilience. The automation wave is a rising tide, and you have two choices. You can cling to the shore and pray the water doesn't reach you, or you can build a boat and use that energy to propel yourself into deeper, more lucrative waters. To wrap this all up, we've seen how technology shifts wage power, why the definition of essential is evolving, and how you can position yourself to thrive in this transition. You don't need to fear the machine. You only need to outpace it by being more uniquely, undeniably human. If you found value in this breakdown, hit that like button to help others find their footing in this shifting economy, and subscribe to stay ahead of the curve as we navigate the future of work together.